All right, more than a dozen news organizations are publishing stories based on the thousands of pages that internal documents were obtained by that whistleblower, Frances Haugen, in a collaboration that they are calling the Facebook Papers. Though they have all access to the same documents, what I find really interesting is how the different outlets are spinning the different stories. If you look at a lot of conservative media outlets, they seem to focus on how Facebook tried to suppress viewpoints from the right, which they did, while liberal organizations like the Washington Post and CNN are writing stories about how Facebook knew it was spreading information but didn't do anything to keep the crazy right-wing media from stopping it happening. Well, joining us now to dig into these two different narratives is the founder and president of the Internet Accountability Project, Mike Davis. Mike, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So I'll just ask you, what do you think is the proper version of what the takeaway is from these papers in terms of what was Facebook really doing? Were they suppressing conservatives, or were they not doing enough to keep these crazy conservative right-wing nut jobs from spreading misinformation, as the Washington Post would have you believe?
I think the takeaway from these papers is that these trillion-dollar big tech monopolists like Facebook have too much power, and they have too much power to control the political conversation in this country, and they have too much power to control commerce in this country. And the appropriate remedy, regardless of, I guess, the liberals want to use this as an excuse for Facebook to do more censorship, to censor more conservative ideas and kick conservatives out of the public square. I think the appropriate remedy here is to enforce our century-old antitrust laws so there are actually competitors to Facebook, and these big tech platforms actually have to compete for their users instead of having users who they abuse.
It's a great point, Mike, because even the whistleblower Frances Haugen, she points this out, saying that Facebook, it knows it's harming people and that lawmakers should intervene to solve that problem. I mean, that's what they want to do. That's what they want. We've talked about this many times, how the left and the right is agreed that they want to take down big tech in some way, but for different reasons. How much momentum do you think this will get? Will it get any buy-in from the right at all?
I think it will. There are 6 pieces of legislation that passed through the House Judiciary Committee with bipartisan support, led by Congressman Ken Buck, a conservative from Colorado. My former boss, Chuck Grassley from Iowa, the top Republican on the Senate Judiciary Committee, is working with Senator Klobuchar right now to pass one of those bills through the Senate. And I think that big tech's going to wake up and realize that the ground has shifted completely from underneath them over the last 2 years, and there's a real chance that Congress is going to pass meaningful bipartisan antitrust reforms to rein in big tech.
You know, Mike, one of the things that's interesting, though, in the papers, they talk about, you knew that conservative media was portraying things and we should have done more. The problem I have right now is I don't want some leftist in Silicon Valley making the decision about what appropriate free speech is, because they're going to say anything that is conservative, that anything that doesn't, promote some leftist woke agenda is where the line should be. I mean, so I guess the question is, where's the line between accountability and free speech? I don't really care. I think the left should do what they want. Get out there. I want to expose all of their bad ideas and policies, but it feels like the left doesn't want anybody to hear anything from the right.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. We don't need more regulations. We need to enforce our antitrust laws. We need to break up big tech. We don't need the government. We don't need Jen Psaki in the White House calling into Facebook and saying that we need to censor COVID misinformation, whatever Tony Fauci says is the regime's line that day. We need to break up these big tech platforms. We need to have more than one neck for the government to choke.
Mike, do you think that these revelations about Facebook will be a threat to the company at all in the long run? Because we also have simultaneously Mark Zuckerberg trying to expand their offerings and gain dominance in the form of metaverse platforms. Is the government allowing them to become too big because they're pushing themselves in other ways?
The government has allowed them to become too big because we've had antitrust amnesty in this country starting under President Obama. We've had our antitrust laws on the books for a century, and the problem is that President Obama did not enforce them because he wanted to take care of his big tech buddies in the Silicon Valley, and they've grown to the point between antitrust amnesty and Section 230 immunity, where they are trillion-dollar big tech monopolists, and they have too much power over our lives. They control communication, they control the political debate, We saw this during the campaign. They actually censored the New York Post, the oldest newspaper in the United States, because it was reporting potential corruption by the Biden family. And so they just censored them. They have too much power in this country, and we need to break them up.
Absolutely. That Hunter Biden story was suppressed because they didn't want it out. Mike, I appreciate your perspective and insight. Thank you for joining us once again.
Thank you for having me.
You bet.